May the words of my lips and the meditation of my heart be acceptable in your sight, O Lord, our strength and our Redeemer. Amen. The lectionary takes us today to the baptism of Jesus, and in the readings this Sunday we move into the new season of the church year. It's the first season of ordinary time in the year, the time that gets us between the great Advent Christmas cycle to the Lenten Easter cycle. And this season of ordinary time has a bit of a different focus than the one that starts after Pentecost. And in that this one really talks about evangelism. It talks about the spreading of the light to all the nations of the earth. It picks up that symbol of the Epiphany where the wise men are the first Gentiles to recognize Jesus as the light of the world. And so we pick that up and we move directly from the Epiphany to the baptism of Jesus. And so we talk about baptism, we talk about converting to become making disciples of Christ and so forth. And this theme tends to follow through the next number of weeks until late February when we start Lent. So today I'm talking about evangelism. And in order to do that, that's a big topic. I'm not going to just talk about everything there is to say about evangelism. I really want to hone in on one particular aspect of evangelism. But in order to get there, I have to set a few things off to one side. So permit me to do that. We all know that Christianity is a proselytizing religion. We all know we should be spreading the news and so forth. Most of us in the Anglican Church are not particularly comfortable with that aspect of it, and we tend to distance ourselves from these so-called evangelicals who are out there knocking on doors and trying to win converts. And certainly from my theological perspective, their evangelism is critical, but there are better and worse ways to do it, and better and worse reasons to do it. So I just want to hive off, for the sake of clarity, that the most obvious and pressing reason to go and win converts for Anglicans these days is the vampire evangelism reason, which is we need new blood around this place. So that's the first wrong reason to go out and share the good news, because that's not good news, actually. We sure would love you to come and shoulder some of the burden around here, because we're all getting a little tired. And that's a great sell job, let me tell you. So that's not evangelism. I know it's real. I know we care about the church. I know we are concerned about the future of the church, and it's very real, and it's legitimate as far as it goes from our perspective. But it's not the reason that we share the faith. The reason we share the faith is for them, not for us. It's because we have something that needs to be shared. That's why the light needs to go out to all the corners of the earth. It's because the world needs that light. And so it falls to us to think about what the light is. We have to be really clear about what it is we're sharing. And what that answer is certainly not going to be sharing in the workload. That's not, the workload is not the good news. So that's the first thing that I have to set to one side. The next thing I have to set to one side is the shoulds. We should all go out and evangelize because we are told to. And so we're going to do our job and do that. And for me, that has also never been a compelling reason to share the faith that is in me. I felt it. I want to be a good Christian, and I want to do my job. And so that's real too, to know that this is a responsibility and I should do something about that. I don't want to dismiss it, be too dismissive about it. But at the same time, I want to be very clear that just wanting to do it because you should isn't going to work. It means that you're still just following the rules and you haven't dug down deep enough to find what it is in you that you've got to share, what it is that you have found that is worth sharing. An example of that kind of evangelism, and I'm borrowing a story of a parishioner here, which I love so much I have to share with you. It's a story from when she was in university, and there was an acquaintance of hers that had latched onto her and said, "Are you saved? When were you saved?" And she couldn't ask that question, and because she was Anglican. So they assumed that she hadn't been saved. So then they were after her every day. "Are you saved yet? Can you come to the meeting? We'll get you to come be saved, come get saved, you need to be saved, And finally, just to get the person off their back, our dear parishioner said, last night it happened. I had the moment, and Jesus came to me, and I'm saved. And the person went, yay, and then didn't speak to her again. So this is another wrong way to do evangelism. It's the wrong reason to do evangelism, to mark another one off on your chalkboard and say, that's another one for me up in heaven, right? So I just want to set all those things to one side and say that there are lots of ways to do it badly, but the heart of the evangelical imperative of Christianity is simply that Christianity carries within it something that is incredibly precious and necessary to human life. And that something needs to be shared because people need it. I need the good news of Christianity. I need to know that Jesus saves me. I need to know that I am being saved by the Lord, being brought into connection and oneness with the Lord. I need to know that in my relationship with God, that I can discern the reason why I exist and what I need to do with my life so that I can become the person I was meant to be. I need that. I don't know how I could live without it. And that is, for me, an expression of the core of what I wish other people could experience and have. Now, having said that, this takes me to the place. So that's what evangelism is about, in my opinion. It's what we have that we need to share in the same way that when we discover a good restaurant, the first thing we want to do is tell our friends, you've got to eat at this place. It is great. And it's the same way. You've got to try this spiritual food. It is great. It's the same thing. Now, having said that, this is what I really want to talk about. Because I want to talk about evangelism today in the Western world. Because we've had a narrative about evangelism that has kind of worked in colonial times, where evangelism is what we did to the Aboriginals and to the heathens of Africa. And that no longer works, because the Aboriginals and the Africans are more Christian than we are. So the mission field is right here now. And whatever our message is, it has to speak to people who are living in Vernon, living a normal, ordinary Vernon life. And when you talk to those people, you discover quite quickly that spirituality is good, that people have a very positive view of spirituality, and that's part of the general pop lexicon, where that you want to find spiritual moments and reasons and so forth. And even Jesus has a good name out there beyond the land of church. People say, well, there's, Jesus Gandhi. One of the great jokes about Steve Jobs was in his ads. He just went, Jesus Gandhi, me. Okay, thanks, Steve. I don't think so. But that's a pop culture joke. A Christian did not make that joke. That was someone that saw the absurdity of Steve putting himself in the company of Jesus and Gandhi, because Jesus stands in a class on his own, even in the popular secular mind. Jesus is good. They might not buy the theology of fully divine, but they certainly know Jesus is one of the great ones. So Jesus has a good name. Spirituality has a good name. The thing that is the stumbling block every time is the church. So what I really want to share with you this morning are my ongoing reflections on why evangelism is connected to the church as an organism, as an institution, and specifically through baptism, because that's how we become members of the church. We are baptized into the church. Because theologically, historically, they are inseparable. To become a disciple of Christ means to be baptized into the church. And it's that connection where people go, no, I don't need it. I'm spiritual just the way I am. Thank you very much. I don't, why get baptized? Why be part of a church? I do not need the church. In fact, churches are part of the problem, not part of the solution. And I hear that over and over again. I was just spending my last week, this past week, I spent it mostly not being a priest and being a musician, hanging out with other musician types. And the nicest compliment I got all week was, you're a great pastor because you don't jam religion down my throat. That's the nicest thing you could say about my religious tradition, that I was actually a decent guy and I wasn't always, throwing Jesus in his face. And that's the state the world has gotten into. Doesn't mean I'm not working on them. I am. I'm just not throwing Jesus in his face. But I think that he needs something that I've got. No question. No question. Now, so what's the connection to church? Why does church matter? Why is church relevant? What's the connection between church and spirituality and faith and God's call? And for me, it's hard to put into words, which is why I struggle a little bit. And what I found is an analogy. And I'll give you the analogy and then you'll see where I'm going. The analogy is between living together and marriage. There is a difference between shacking up and getting married. And these days, you can shack up without any social condemnation whatsoever. It's actually the new normal. The new normal is you date or you see each other, maybe you hook up, and then you move in together. That's the next step. And you move in for a couple of years, and you live together for a couple of years until maybe your life settles down and you become stable or you want to have kids or some other thing where you're ready to take that next step. And that's when they show up in my office at around 28 to 32, saying, we want to take that next step and we want to get married. As Steve Martin put it, we want to get emmed, because they couldn't say the word, because it was too scary. I'm ready to get emmed. And there are a couple of things about that phenomenon that I want to highlight. One is that the culture in doing that is actually preserving something important about marriage. The reason they don't want to get married at 22 is because they're afraid of divorce. They want to try before they buy precisely because the commitment is too important to get wrong. And so they want to just, if they take one step at a time and so forth, that if they live together and if it doesn't work out, it's not as disastrous as a divorce, right? So the kids that are working their way into marriages are date, live together, marriage, children. That's now the trajectory that they would like to have. Sometimes the children come a little in advance. But my point is, you don't need to get married. You can have children, you can build a life together without ever saying the words, and no one will blink at you. And what's the difference? Why get married then? And the problem is, unless you're married, you don't know the difference. And if you look at a living together relationship, you say, you get all the benefits of being married without the marriage. You can live together, you can sleep together, you can build a life together, you can come home and have company, you can do all the things about being married. It's just a piece of paper, right? And the problem with that, and I disagree profoundly with that, it is not just a piece of paper. It's standing up in public and saying, I promise to stay with you for the rest of our lives. That's the difference between marriage. It's whether you've made the promise or not, whether you've committed 100% to this project or not. And until you have committed 100%, you don't know what that relationship is going to be like. And there's nothing I can tell you that will explain to you on the other side of that great divide what you're missing. I can tell you, after 25 years of working with the same person that I promised to stay with, whether I liked her or not, on any given day, has taken our relationship to a wonderful place that it could never have gotten to if we were still just living together. Never have gotten us to this place. And the commitment is an essential doorway through which we had to pass in order to get to this place of the relationship. And I can't describe it to you in words because it's more of a feeling, it's more of an experience, it's more of a knowledge that you're stuck with me and I'm stuck with you. And that forces us to accept and love the whole person for who they are because the door is closed behind us. We can't just walk out at any time. And it changes everything and it makes it better. It makes it absolutely better. And if you're talking to people who are just falling in love, they can't know. They have no brain to know what the difference is because they're just in love and it's great. And that's great. Enjoy the love. You got to fall in love. It's a wonderful experience to go through. And when you're done being in love and you really care about each other, come talk to me. Because then we can work on the real long-term important stuff. So that's my view of marriage. Now, everything I've said about marriage applies to spirituality and religion and baptism. Because from the other side of baptism, from the other side of commitment and discipleship, if you've not ever made the lifetime promise to be a disciple of Jesus until you die, you can't know the depths of spiritual growth that you're missing. As long as you are a spiritual consumer and have the feelings of spirituality, you can have all the feelings, you can have all the benefits of spiritual life and practice and so forth, but the thing that is missing is the commitment to Jesus as your teacher and guide. And without that commitment, you can't know where that commitment will take you, what level of spiritual growth and development is waiting for you on the other side of that commitment. And so for me, the question of why the church is inherently linked to baptism. Why the church is because the church is the group of us who have made the commitment. We've stood up in public and said, I promise to be faithful to Jesus so long as we both shall live. Jesus is going to be alive forever, so it's basically until I die. So that commitment is the door through which we pass in baptism into that deeper level of spirituality, so that as a follower of Jesus, as a disciple, we are now in relationship with Jesus through all the trials and processes of our life, and it's inescapable, the question, what would Jesus do? What is Jesus calling me to do as I go through this particular challenge or growth period or whatever it is that we're doing? And if we have not actually said, I am a disciple, formally and in any kind of permanent way, then that question doesn't have the urgency that it does for those of us who say, I am a Christian and I am a follower of Jesus. That as we are struggling with whatever the things of our life are, illness or financial concerns or problems with the kids or problems with the parents or whatever, the question becomes, how do I do this as a disciple of Jesus? And that changes us in ways that if we're just waiting for the benefits, we're not going to get. And the final thing about the difference about being in church and just being spiritual and being religious is that when you say you become a servant of Jesus or a disciple of Jesus, that's a very, very abstract concept. And it can't be reduced to just reading the story and trying to learn what he meant with his teachings. It's not just that. More profoundly, it's about seeking and serving Jesus in the faces of other human beings. That where do you meet Jesus? Well, yes, you meet him in the Bible stories. Yes, you meet him in the sacrament, but you also meet him in the face of your neighbor. And particularly in the face of the weak and vulnerable, but also especially in the face of other servants of Jesus. And there is a world of difference between building a relationship between Christians than there is between non-Christians. That when whatever kind of relationship, whether you're a co-worker, whether you're working together in a church to do the ministry of the church and so forth, that seeking Jesus in the face of your neighbor changes how we relate to each other, and it teaches us, and it has this enormous knock-on effect throughout our lives. I've had people serve on church council and say that there were things that we worked through on church council that taught them how to work through similar issues in their workplace. And so as we struggle to work through tough issues, sometimes deep controversies, hard feelings, all the things that life throws in front of us, and we try to do that in peace and faithfulness with each other, we grow and we develop, and we bring that to the rest of the world. In the same way that marriages bring love and commitment and stability to the other relationships to which they're connected. Same thing, knock-on effect. And these are subtle things, and you can't point to them, and in many ways you can't even see them from the other side of the commitment door. So in my own reflections about evangelism, about what it is that we are sharing with the world, what are we called to share with the world? We're called to share this relationship with Jesus, that we are this discipleship, this commitment to discipleship, and without baptism and what it signifies, the commitment to the journey to Christ as leader and teacher, that without that, we're still always going to be missing something. And so, so for me, the call to evangelize is the call to bring into baptism and then beyond baptism to grow into the fullness of Christ's image. And that's something which Daniel Church does rather well. We're not so good at the falling in love with Jesus stuff. But once you've already fallen in love with Jesus and want to grow into the fullness of that, that's where we shine. And so I commend that to you, to those you know, and I encourage you to realize what it is that you have. Because just like old marrieds sometimes don't know what they have until it's gone, Christians sometimes don't know what they have while they're appreciating all that it's giving them. In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, amen.